Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Sanford of NextLabs, and thanks for joining us this morning. We've got an excellent agenda in store for you today, and I'm joined by Brian Meeker. Brian is the principal at Deloitte, where he heads the product strategy and lifecycle management practice. Brian also leads the alliance between Deloitte and Siemens. I'm also joined by Jim Conrad, senior technical wizard at NextLabs and a longtime information security expert.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Just a reminder for all participants, today's session is going to be recorded. So let's just dive right in. We've seen an increasing level of maturity in the PLM market over the last decade, and it's clear that PLM has reached the status of a bedrock application in most industries. Brian, Deloitte has an extensive PLM and MES practice. Can you please take a minute to explain more about how Deloitte helps clients improve engineering and manufacturing efficiency?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. So why don't I start? I'll start real quickly just by talking a little bit about our practice, and it'll give you a good sense of how we help our clients in both PLM and MES. So our product strategy and lifecycle management practice, it sits within our enterprise technology and performance. Basically, it's where we do all of our enterprise level transformation programs. And specific to product strategy and lifecycle management, we have basically four different areas that we focus on. One is product strategy, where we help organizations define their product development strategy, their R&D strategies, where they may be doing some M&A activity around R&D, and how to integrate and standardize around those offerings within their product development portfolio. The other big areas around lean product development. So this is where we lean out all of the product development and engineering processes to be more efficient and more effective. Inside of the digital product development analytics practice, this is where we do PLM, MES, and advanced analytics. And we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but we have pre-configured versions of the Siemens PLM and MES packages. And then we also do a lot of work around organ talent and how you organize R&D organ talent. How do you hire and retain? How do you incentivize? What are the roles and responsibilities when you standardize the processes? So everything organ talent related around engineering. And when we do the transformation across those four areas, we help clients get significant savings in the range of think of 15 to 20% of your total engineering workforce being freed up to go do additional new product development, or doing 30 to 50% faster time to market across projects. But as we look at this space, what's really important is when we're doing these transformations is how do you get the extended enterprise and all of the data to work very seamlessly across the engineering and product development capabilities out into manufacturing and supply chain. So with that, Jim, maybe you can take a few minutes and talk about how you help organizations around the extended enterprise.
Sure, thanks, Brian. Yeah, you're exactly right about that. And here's how we would protect the extended enterprise based on what you were just talking about. So in this example, what we're going to see here is an overview of the Acme company that has 3 different locations, all have an Acme email, but they're all working on different pieces of, in this case, an assembly for transmission. So some can see the case, some can see the control subassembly, and this data has got to be shared between, but in a safe and secure way. So each area has a specific task and need. So in this case, we have Ed from the US, Jin from the Acme China, and Sandeep and Sanjay from India. Here we'll see within Active Directory where we're getting these attributes from that we use to make decisions in policy to help protect these files when they're on the move. The policies here are shown. Those are what are deployed and then used to make the decisions based on user access to the files. So it all seamlessly works together with Teamcenter to come up with a strategy of what your company is going to need to use in order to protect this information. So here we'll see within Teamcenter a part that's part of this overall transmission assembly. We can take a look at the properties. Here we'll see where we use something. In this case, we're going to probably use the IP classification as one of the attributes from, in this case, the part, in order to make the decision on. And here we can see these classifications for all the different parts within that BOM line. So very controlled by how you want this access. So here we can see, in this case, Ed looking at the entire transmission, including the subassembly. We can look at the rights that are applied to this, and this will come back. And as we saw, that was a NextLabs drop down. And here we'll see view, print, save as, export. So it gives you a full breadth of what you need to accomplish as far as policy to protect stuff. Here we'll take a look at, it's got a .nxl extension. And now we'll take a look at all these parts. In this case, Jin's going to sign on, and here he can only see the case. So since he's in the China location, he can see the case, but he can't see the subassembly. If we scroll down and take a look, we can also see pieces of the transmission case. So he has view access to all of that stuff, but you'll see here that it shows that he doesn't have access to these other files. And those are the ones that he's not allowed to look at from his location. So we'll see they're grayed out. Now we'll try Sanjay. This, again, remember, he's from India. He can see the subassembly. So in this case, he's taking a look at the subassembly, but can't see any of the case information. Again, he can go back in through his NX client, and as we can see here, it's going to show that he doesn't have the ability to open certain parts of that assembly as well. So again, he can work on the pieces that he needs to work on, but not be able to see the things that aren't pertinent to what he's allowed to look at and view. And as we can see in the viewer, it'll show the subassembly at this point. So hey, Jim, this is what we think about securing the extended enterprise on NextLabs.
That's fantastic. It's pretty cool that people in 3 different locations can have 3 different sets of rights associated with the same assembly. That's awesome. That's one of the beauties of PLM. And, PLM is an acknowledged bedrock application. So, Brian, can you please spend a few minutes painting a picture of what you see advanced organizations doing? So they've got to connect the data from this digital thread across not just extended enterprise, but engineering, manufacturing, and their own supply chain. How do they go about that, Brian?
Yeah, so thanks, Jim. I think it's really important to be able to connect that data, as we just saw. But what we're seeing advanced companies do is connect all of the major enterprise applications and more importantly, that digital thread that runs across them. So in this example, what you're seeing here is at the top, you see the typical flow of systems engineering and the development processes out through sourcing and procurement, and then the manufacturing to plan and build, and ultimately out into the field to maintain it. So typical value chain. And cutting across there, you can see, and I know it's a little bit of a complex picture, but think of PLM, used to be an island of information, not really connected to any other systems. You also had MES and ERP, also in standalone situations, typically at every plant. And really nothing around managing the software side around ALM. However, what we're seeing advanced companies do is they've taken and implemented, Teamcenter as their PLM, they're implementing Ops Center as their MES, they're implementing ALM to go manage, all of the software requirement capabilities. And so, mixing all of that together, you now have ALM, PLM, and MES as the digital thread, and connected into all of the sensor related information that's feeding back into PLM and ALM, as well as out to the shop floor and feeding into control tower dashboards and those types of things to find out exactly what's happening out on the shop floor. So now we have a full spectrum of the digital thread across a very complex set of applications that previously most organizations, like I said, those were all islands of information. And whenever you have islands of information, you have lots of ineffective communication. You have poor use of the data. Oftentimes people working off the wrong versions. And whenever our clients ask us to come in and help them define their business case and strategy around PLM or MES or ALM, they're always looking for us to define the value. And all of that value comes from typically bad requirements definition up front, which is all around ALM and PLM, sharing those requirements and being able to share that data out to the rest of the extended enterprise around manufacturing, early involvement, supply chain, early involvement. You know, all of that shows up as what gets classified as design for X, where you're designed for cost, designed for weight, designed for manufacturability, designed for supply chain, and designed for compliance, on and on. All of that is, you know, how do you share that information across that digital thread across the entire organization? So, you know, one thing that, you know, you have to be aware of when you're sharing that information, though, is the security model and the data security around all of that digital thread. So, Jim, maybe you can take a few minutes and talk about how NextLabs would manage that security and across the digital thread.
Yeah, sure, Brian. Yeah, it's interesting that you referenced the multi-tier supply chains. You know, we'll take a look at how NextLabs, you know, provides data safety across that multi-tier environment, and how we can apply those rights, like we looked at previously in the extended enterprise, to the data up and down the supply chain, and to integrate that within the workflow. So here we're going to see the environment with Ed, Ross, and Claudine. So Ed's the primary owner of the data. He shares that out with Ross, who's a tier 1 contractor, and then Claudine, who happens to be a subcontractor of Ross. So here we have 3 different users, all with a specific job function. Again, classifying the data. Each has their specific role, but in order to safely use the data, we have to be able to protect that supply chain, as we talked about earlier. And then at some point we could, you know, revoke access to the data if need be. So here we'll have Ed sign into our Sky DRM, which is part of Teamcenter, and here we'll see a file that he shared. So in this case, we have the transmission assembly. We can take a look at the information that's been set up for policy for protection, and we can also go out and share this file. So in this case, since Ed's the project manager, he can share it with another project, in this case Ross's, and he can also take a look at the log, and it'll start showing activity. So here we see the process starting from the beginning of protect and share. So now Ross will go out in through his project. Again, he'll see the shared file that Ed shared with him. He can then turn around and reshare this information. So here we are, you know, working our way away from the enterprise into the supply chain. Now we'll see Claudine, who's going to get on as a subcontractor. She'll be able to actually open the file that she received from Ross, and here she can see and has access to the transmission case. All right, so in this particular instance, she only has ability to see that. If we go back and view, Ed can see where it was protected, share, reshare, and viewed a few times within the activity log of SkyDRM for that file. Now at this point, Ed can go in and actually revoke the rights to those files. So maybe at the end of the life for that particular assembly revision or part that they're looking at. So in this case, everybody will be on the same page because he can actually restrict, or in this case, revoke access. So when we go back in, we'll see that that's no longer exists within Ross's project. And we'll also go in and look at Claudine and see that the file is completely gone because that was the only one that she had there to share. So that's how it covers the supply chain. And in this case, hey, Jim, it's pretty clear, you know, how we do, you know, remote workforce and integrate supply chain here. And we know it's here to stay because of everything that's going on these days and the security that needs to be seamless to travel along that digital thread.
Well, that's fantastic. And it's clear that we've established that PLM is also here to stay. Not only is this remote workforce and integrated supply chain here to stay, but PLM is as well. And the enablement of a digital thread has to include not only your extended enterprise, but extended partners all along that supply chain. So, Brian, I really liked your point of view on that and how the Siemens PLM and MES tools enable that digital thread. Can you tell us about your pre-configured PLM and MES solutions, and specifically, how have you secured that data across those solutions?
Absolutely, thanks, Jim. So, yeah, you know, this happened back in the 2010, 2011 timeframe when Teamcenter Unified was first released, we saw the capabilities that PLM was becoming much more mature and stable, and being more than just a toolkit of being able to go build your own application, which a lot of companies previously had done. It's now a very user-friendly application that allows engineers and other cross-functional teams to develop around the product, using advanced security and those types of things. So what we did was we looked at how all of our other clients previously had designed their processes to go implement, and we picked the best of the best processes. And what we saw was an 80-20 rule where 80% of it was the same and 20% of it was unique to that organization. So as an example, the engineering change process, as we helped companies, lean out their processes using lean engineering techniques, we saw that that was roughly the same when we went from, different clients in their engineering change process, and they all said they liked our version of it. So what we did was we took the best of all of our client implementations and said, let's go build our own pre-configured processes and then embed those on top of Teamcenter. And that's what we did. So, and we've been using that now for 8 to 10 years in the market. Amazing response from our clients, both big and small. Large organizations, they like it because they can go standardize. So we have a recent version that we have a great YouTube video where we helped a client with Siemens to go standardize their business processes across like 40 different instances of those processes. So, the client had grown through acquisitions, and they wanted to standardize those processes across the 40 different businesses that they had acquired over the last decade. And with our pre-configured processes and pre-configured solution, it was easy to go do that. And since then, we have now launched this in Polarian as well. So we have pre-configured requirements management and ALM processes for Polarian. And we this year also launched a pre-configured version of MES, so Ops Center. And we're now implementing standard configurations of Polarian, Teamcenter, and Ops Center for our clients. And what that helps us do is, one, it makes it it takes the risk out of these types of big projects. It makes them significantly faster, and ultimately lowers the cost of these big transformations. And it gives our clients the very best processes versus making them up every time. They're leveraging the best of the best. Yet still, and recall that I said it was 80-20. So retaining and allowing us to really focus our time as experts on the 20% that matters to them, and really optimizing that 20% that makes them unique. And the 80%, the engineering change process, no one really argues that process shouldn't be any different across any organization. Those you take as is, where it's the leanest and best. And so, that's how we manage the deployments. And it's all fundamentally going back to the previous slide of enabling that digital thread across the organization to make sure that we're sharing that information as seamlessly as possible. And so, we built these pre-configured solutions, and we have different groups within our firm that focus directly on things like ITAR and compliance. So part of our enterprise risk group, they helped us build in the controls within our processes to help manage that. And so Jim, this is probably a great time for you to show us how NextLabs has created policy-driven intelligent engines around that secure data to automate the creation, the management, the application of compliance guidelines, similar to like ITAR that I just talked about.
Yep. Thank you, Brian. So here we'll see in this short demonstration access control. In this case, we're going to be looking at ITAR. So here's our business problem. You need to share ITAR files securely and allow users or protect data for both users in the US and non-US to access those files. So here we have 4 users, Ed, Steve, Hal, and Ross, 2 from the US, 1 from the UK, and 1 from France, and then associated ITAR licenses for each of those 2 users that are outside the US. Here we have, again, a set of policies that will apply depending if the compliance is for IR or ITAR, so on and so forth. In this case, we can see where we can restrict access. We're going to be looking at Active Directory now, where we can see attributes that we will use in collaboration with Teamcenter as far as what the users, where they're from, right, so on and so forth. In this case, he's in engineering. He's a U.S. employee. In this case, Hal's from the U.K. He has a license of TAA01. Here we see Ross. In this case, Ross is from France, and he has a license of TAA02. So all these attributes that are used within policy make these decisions as the person tries to access the information. So here we have a jurisdiction, we have a license. In this case, if it's open, the protection will be different from one that needs to be more secure. So in this case, if we pick an ITAR jurisdiction, we're looking for a specific license to apply to that. So the protection is then created against it. And now we can take a look at the file information and see that that policy has been applied for that particular file. Same thing for the connecting rod. So in this case, we can view the file information. We'll see that it's got a TAA01 ITAR for your jurisdiction. And then we can go, in this case, the JT to go and take a look at the connecting rod. We can now go in and take a look at the last part. In this case, we're going to open it up in the viewer. And in this case, it happens to be a roller part. So the person setting this up, in this case, Ed, has decided that he's created policies that comply with what they need to. Hal's going to go in now. Remember, he's from the UK. He'll look at the file information. In this case, he can view this particular file, right? So in this case, it's the connecting rod he can view. Ross can go in. He can't see the connecting rod, or in this case, the roller. He only has view capabilities for the roller, but he couldn't see the connecting rod. So because of the licenses that are applied pertain to the specific attributes for those users when we're looking at this information. And then the last user we're going to look at here is Max. And if we look at him, he's actually from the US, but he's a supplier. So based on that, he has a different set of criteria. He has a view, but with a watermark. So in this case, when he views the file info, he can see both of those files, but in this case, they're watermarked. So we bring them up in our viewer. Here's the connecting rod again, but in this case, we can see the watermark in the background. So this just happens to be, an example of ITAR, export compliance, but we could do this for any other type of compliance problem that we might have.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So regulatory compliance, or ITAR, is just a version of regulatory compliance. But once you've got a policy engine, you can go do anything you need to do, regardless of the regulatory issue you're trying to solve. So, wow, guys, thanks very much for this. This data and this perspective has been fantastic. Thank you. Today, we've seen how the Deloitte DPLM and DMES solutions enable Teamcenter to drive enormous value across an enterprise, and how NextLabs can be coupled with that to provide assured regulatory compliance and secure supply chain, and to smoothly enable an extended enterprise. So many thanks, obviously, to Brian and Jim for their time and their expertise. And I've just got one more question for the audience at large. What do you guys think?